Welcome to Parliamentary Talk, the show that brings life to parliamentary rules of democracy. My name is Larry Taylor.
And my name is Keri Capen.
And we're joined today by our producer, John Ellis, who might be joining the conversation with calls from viewers and comments from the chat line. If you're watching the live broadcast, you can submit questions by calling 503-588-6444. You can also type questions into the YouTube chat box. So the United States is unique in that it was the first country that was created based on the concept of the rule of law. This is why we have attorneys everywhere. The benefit is that we settle our differences in court rather than with guns. One of the most critical processes in a democracy is elections. Today's program illustrates why we are thankful that we have the full Robert's Rules of Order there for the unexpected. Keri and I were involved in an election that was run completely according to the rules. However, the results were challenged after the meeting was adjourned, which triggered 3 months of acrimony and abuse of authority. Keri was the parliamentarian for the election, and I was there as an observer. Our guest today is Leah LaFleur, who chaired the meeting. Leah, welcome to Parliamentary Talk.
Hi, Larry and Keri.
Hi.
Leah, it isn't common to have a parliamentarian in a committee meeting. Why did you ask Keri to advise you?
Well, I wanted to ensure the meeting was fair and adhered to democratic principles. I felt that having a parliamentarian that everyone respected would reassure the delegates and the election would be run completely above board. Additionally, the parliamentarian of the parent organization and another parliamentarian from the community were present at the election. I worked with Keri before the election to write rules so that there would be a clear process stated for and agreed to by the membership. This was something that had not been done previously.
Keri, give us some background to the meeting.
Yeah, so this committee is required to hold elections every 2 years to elect delegates to the 5 standing committees. The relevant committee is the Rules Committee, which has 3 delegates and 2 alternate spots. This committee is a component of the parent organization that you can see on screen there, which also has a chair and a parliamentarian, and the parliamentarian was present at this meeting. Leah and I had talked several times before the meeting, and I knew that she was well prepared. She had told me that she was aware that groups within the committee had been organizing, and when I arrived, there were slate cards lying around the room. Elections for the 5 standing committees were to be held for delegates, and then a separate election for alternates to each committee. When the elections for the Rules Committee came up, all of those interested in running as delegates were able to speak. The election was held, and everyone accepted the results. Later, one of the individuals who had not won a delegate spot ran for and won an alternate position.
So Leah, how did the meeting go from your perspective?
It was a long afternoon, but the elections went smoothly. The meeting ended on time. I did a significant amount of coordination beforehand. There was lots of food and coffee for everyone so we could get all of our work done with as few interruptions as possible. I had 2 sets of ballot counters, which made counting the ballots from each of the 10 races go much more quickly. Overall, people told me they were pleased with how the election was conducted.
And how long did the peace and harmony last?
2 days after the election, someone who was elected to be an alternate delegate to the Rules Committee contacted me to let me know that they thought the election was unfair and needed to be redone.
And what did they identify as not being fair?
2 issues were raised. The first issue was that this person had been put on a slate card without their knowledge or consent. The second issue was that the 3 delegates who were listed on the slate card and were elected as delegates were not diverse. They all fell into the same identity group. The parent organization's parliamentarian issued a ruling on the election.
Interesting. So then what happened?
I started receiving demands from members of the community, people who had heard about the situation from the aggrieved candidate, and certain individuals from the leadership of the parent organization to redo the election. I looked into the bylaws of the parent organization and the bylaws of my committee, and I did not see that the parent organization had the authority to order me to redo the election. After I refused, the chair threatened not to seat the delegation at the next general meeting. She also added a cryptic agenda item to the next general meeting of the parent organization that stated, "No future notice of future action for third quarter meeting. motion to require the committee to rerun elections for the delegates and alternates to the Rules Committee. Because of the charged environment the demand to redo the election had caused, several members of the committee asked me what could be done to address the complaints against the elections.
And then what did you do next?
I contacted Keri, my parliamentarian, for advice on how to handle the situation.
So, Keri, what did you do after Leah contacted you?
So I started researching. I went to Robert's Rules of Order, the parent organization's bylaws, and the committee's bylaws to review if there was any basis for the complaints. When I sent Leah's my opinion, I was careful to include citations to all of those appropriate spots so that she could make informed decisions. Based on my research, I first advised Leah that the chair of the parent organization had no authority to order her to do anything, and in particular had no authority to order the redo of the election. The only people who can call a special meeting are 10 members of the committee or the chair. So unless that happens, there was no way to call a special meeting. And in this instance, the chair did not want to act on her own unless she had support from her membership. Challenges could have been made on the election during the meeting. The only way that you can make challenges after the meeting has ended is when there's a continuing breach, and we'll kind of explain that later. But ultimately, the decision on what to do with regards to an election or any action taken by a body is with the members of the body itself. So if they chose to revisit the election, then that would be up to them.
So Leah, what did you do next?
Between the strong feelings, confusion about the process, and the notice period, I ended up scheduling a meeting about 2 months after the election. It was important to me that the committee members knew that the situation would be addressed by the book, while also balancing the background of the complaints upon which the election was contested. I felt that this would be fundamental to provide to the electors so they could decide the next step.
And what did you discover?
The first complaint was about the slate card. Slate cards are commonly used in elections, and there's no rule against using them, either in the bylaws of the parent organization or in the bylaws of my committee. The slate card included a very diverse set of candidates and was successful in getting many of the members on the card elected. The specific complaint was from a person who was elected as an alternate delegate to the Rules Committee. He hadn't given permission to be listed on the slate card. In fact, he had not declared that he was a candidate for any position on the Rules Committee. The second complaint was about the lack of diversity of the 3 individuals who were elected as delegates to the Rules Committee. Yes, the 3 elected to this committee were of the same identity group.
Interesting. So Leah, what happened next?
I convened the special meeting with Keri again attending as parliamentarian. We reviewed the complaints. We also clarified what the rules were regarding redoing elections. It wasn't clear going into the meeting how much of the election might be redone. One of the people who created the slate card apologized for not asking permission to list the individual. Multiple other members also apologized for any hurt feelings caused by the slate card situation and made a point to say that as a personal policy for anyone making a slate card, consent to add a person or candidate to any future slate card would be sought. By the end of the meeting, instead of a motion to redo the election, a motion to affirm the results of the election was made and passed. So the meeting was adjourned and the election results stayed the same. During the 2 months between meetings, one of the delegates to the Rules Committee resigned, and the person who filed the complaint was elected to take the open position. So by the time this meeting had occurred, he was already a delegate to the Rules Committee.
So 2 months was a big gap between meetings.
Yes, it was, but it was a very unusual situation, and it took some time to wrap our heads around what needed to be done to resolve it and to provide appropriate notice in which to do it. Thankfully, the gap between meetings allowed some of the more intense feelings about the election to cool. That was needed in order for us to have a productive special meeting.
So Keri, was there grounds to the charge that the election was invalid because the 3 elected delegates were not diverse?
So no. The bylaws of the parent organization say Gender, race, age, physical ability, sexual orientation, and gender identity shall be given strong consideration in the election process. This is not a hard requirement or a quota, and so no bylaws were violated even in the election of the 3 delegates. Also, while the original elected delegates to the Rules Committee were of one identity group, the delegates elected to all of the standing committees as a whole were overwhelmingly diverse.
Did the chair of the parent organization have the authority to not seat delegates at the next general meeting?
So absolutely not. Members of the parent organization have 4 basic rights. They have the right to attend meetings, they have the right to make motions, they have the right to speak and debate, and they have the right to vote. Members cannot be deprived of these rights except through disciplinary proceedings. So no, the chair had no authority to bar anyone from meetings and was completely out of line to claim that she did. Authority comes from the members of Leah's committee, and because they are the electing authority of these delegates.
This situation illustrates several violations of democratic principles. There was one member demanding that an election be redone. This is a decision that belongs to the majority of the group and isn't the right of one individual. There was a chair demanding that an election be redone. Again, unless the bylaws give this power to the chair cannot do this. Page 466 of Robert's Rules of Order says, because the voting body itself is the ultimate judge of election disputes, only that body has the authority to resolve them in the absence of a bylaw or a special rule of order that specifically grants another body that authority. There was the chair threatening to bar delegates from attending the next meeting. The chair does not have the power to take the right away from members attending their own meeting. If someone feels an election was improper, they should raise a point of order, and this should be done during the meeting when the election was conducted. Robert's Rules allows for a point of order to be made later if it could be classified as a continuing breach. And there are 5 instances of a continuing breach, so this is a little wonky, so bear with us. But these are, a main motion conflicts with a bylaw.
Doesn't matter this time.
A main motion has been adopted that is in conflict with a previously adopted main motion.
Also not relevant today.
Any action taken in violation of federal, state, or local laws.
Not applicable.
Any action taken in violation of a fundamental principle of parliamentary law. Any action taken in violation of a rule protecting absentees, a rule in the bylaws requiring votes to be taken by ballot, or a rule protecting a basic right of an individual member. Very specific.
Yep.
And finally, there was the weird prior notice for the motion to redo the election by the parent organization. At the time of this meeting, there was no requirement for to give notice of motions that could be brought up under new business.
So one of the services that a parliamentarian can provide is writing an opinion. Parliamentarians credentialed by the National Association of Parliamentarians are bound by a code of ethics that prevents them from providing opinions that fit the customer's expectations, and they should be impartial. An opinion is a response to a question about a parliamentary procedure and takes into consideration bylaws, federal, state, and local laws, meeting minutes, and any other relevant documents to the question. In this case, 2 opinions were written. One was written by the parliamentarian of the parent organization, and the other was written by myself as parliamentarian to Leah. This kind of a document is just an opinion and advice that is provided to the chair, who ultimately decides how to act upon that advice.
So how did the 2 opinions measure up, Keri?
So the format of a good opinion should contain the following sections. You should have an introduction that states the questions which the analysis will provide answers to. In this example, a question might be, can a member demand that an election be redone? It should contain background information which states the facts as understood by the parliamentarian. This was both introduction and the background information were pretty similar in both of our opinions. And then you should have the sources consulted. So any bylaws, parliamentary authority, minutes, whatever you were using to draw your opinion from. In the parent organization's parliamentary opinion. Most of the sources cited weren't actually relevant. They referred to the bylaws of Leah's committee and to the parent organization, but didn't actually directly address the question that was being asked. And she did mention, reference the same section of Roberts that I did about contesting elections. And then the opinion. So the parliamentarian's logic in arriving at the conclusions based on the sources and the background information provided. So in this instance, the slate card was stated as a continuing breach, which was why it was allowed to be challenged after the meeting had adjourned. The issue of one member, not to mention other individuals in the parent organization not having standing to demand a special meeting, was not addressed in her opinion at all. And then you would conclude with a specific statement or statements of the parliamentarian's opinion. So the conclusion reached, by the parent organization's opinion, although I disagreed with how she got there, we both came to the same conclusion, that if a special meeting is called by the members to re-examine the election, that body was the authority on whether or not they would redo it. So she just kind of got there a little bit by a convoluted mission.
So one preventive measure that you can take to better ensure smooth elections is to review the article in the bylaws that addresses elections. Elections are often included in the articles on officers. Bylaws should include the nomination procedure and instructions to the nominating committee. It should specify the day and time of the elections, such as the second Saturday in March of even-numbered years. There should be a section that defines the election process, the terms of office, and the removal from office process. This is where you can identify the voting process if your organization wants to use a preferential voting system rather than majority vote. Anything not specified in the bylaws reverts to what is in Robert's Rules of Order. Much of this was not defined for Leah's organization, which is why the rules were written and presented at the beginning of the meeting.
Did we have any questions from online or anything, John?
We do not have any questions at this point.
Excellent.
So Leah, did you find any value in having a parliamentarian advise you?
I hope so.
Absolutely. As the chair of the committee, it's my responsibility to see that all meetings, especially elections, are done in a fair and transparent manner. Having Keri by my side to consult me throughout the process was invaluable. As the chair, I needed to preside over the meeting. I believe that having a technical specialist like Keri to assist me in the election and its aftermath was the key to the successful resolution of this matter.
So I know from having served as a chair or presiding officer and as a parliamentarian, and I know Larry, you're the same way, it's really difficult to keep track of all the technical aspects of parliamentary procedure and preside over the meeting. So I always try and keep that in mind when I'm serving as a parliamentarian to serve as that backup for the presiding officer, because that relieves them of having to keep track of too many things at once. So it makes a difference, I hope.
Yeah, when you're trying to run a meeting, there's lots of things going on, and it's just nice having someone to be watching over and making sure that things are being conducted democratically, and that people are being chosen with varying opinions, and that really you get a full airing of the issue if there's debate going on.
Yeah.
I have a question, Larry.
Yeah.
So it seems like parliamentarians are supposed to be impartial, and from what I understand, isn't the chair also supposed to be impartial? And that doesn't seem to be a case in a lot of what I've understood in parliamentary procedure. Is there rules in place to help enforce the chair's impartiality?
Well, so the problem is when people choose to break the rules, as we see at the national level, there's little recourse except going to the courts. And unfortunately, in civic organizations like what we deal with, there is not a court system that's going to waste their time with our problems. In the last edition, we we found that someone was able to go to the Department of Justice and get some advice from them on what to do. But again, what holds this whole country together is the concept of the rule of law and that everyone follows the rules. And when you start breaking the rules and violating the rules, then the rule of law breaks down, and then you revert to violence, which is what we don't want to do. This is what makes the United States unique. And so, yes, it's a problem when the chair chooses to ignore the rules and make up their own rules, or they get advice and that somehow in their mind that allows them to do something differently than what the rules specify.
Plus, a lot of.
Yeah.
Plus, a lot of.
I was.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. I would say that in the bylaws for my committee, in the event that the chair was impartial, or not impartial, rather, the membership felt displeased with the leadership of the chair, that there is a process for removal of the chair.
But that requires the members knowing what the rules are. So you want to, if you're a member of any organization, read the bylaws. But then also, and we'll talk about this more in a few minutes, but learn the basics of parliamentarian procedure. There's lots of technicalities, and you can go down all kinds of interesting rabbit holes, but just the basics of understanding how decisions are made and what your rights are can make all the difference. I think a lot of the abuses you see in organizations stems from ignorance. Like, there's not any malice, it's just that people don't know that they have, members don't know they have rights, and leaders don't know that there are procedures to follow to keep things flowing normally. So.
And if people don't know that their rights are being abused, then it's really hard to stand up for them. I think both Keri and I got involved with parliamentary procedure for the same reason. We were finding ourselves being subjected to leadership rulings and that just didn't feel right, and we would go study up afterwards, and of course the meeting was over, and so there's nothing you can do after the fact. But we realized that we had to get better on our game, and so we both started down this path of learning Robert's rules and how democracy really functions. And the more I discover, the more I'm horrified how willing we are to just take direction from people, and especially ones who don't have the authority to be telling us to do things. Ultimately, in a democracy, the decision belongs to the majority, and we find that people just sit back and take direction instead of asserting their rights.
Yep.
I want to thank Leah for, thank you all for that response. That was great. Leah, for your response, that's how I feel, right? That it should work that way. And I've seen it not work that way. And so the reason I tried to bring that up now, Larry, is because we've been talking before the show about the people that you can reach out to within the organization, be it nationally or locally, to say, hey, this isn't right, and that there are people at different levels to reach out to in the organization, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, and my goal in anything that I'm involved in is to ensure that the principles of democracy are adhered to. I am not there to make the chair some sort of authority figure. I'm there to ensure the principles of democracy are being followed, and that the people in the organization feel like they have a role in what is being done. When you find organizations where all the decision is being taken away from the group, then there is no reason for them to attend their meetings, and you find that ultimately your membership dwindles. Right. This is a common pattern, and if chairs would not try to seize authority and rather let the body make decisions, they would find themselves with a much more participatory organization.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to add to that what this really brought to me was that the State Central Committee of the Democratic Party, of whatever state happens to be, is really the governing power of the Democratic Party or whatever party. And the people that choose to become delegates or State Central Committee members need to really understand the power that they hold, and that it's important to wield it and know the rules. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, this is not a partisan issue. The members of any political party need to assert their rights.
Yep.
There was a organization, I think it was in 2008, where the chair gavelled, the convention closed. The chair doesn't have the right to gavel a convention closed if the business is not concluded and the body hasn't agreed to it. But the people don't understand that, and they could have had someone else step up and continue running the meeting.
Right. So if you want to learn more about parliamentary procedure, you have a couple different places that you can go. One, you can go to the National Association of Parliamentarians. That's NAP. My husband claims it's not a coincidence that the acronym is NAP, and that's parliamentarians.org. The OAP, the Oregon Association of Parliamentarians, or OregonAP.org, they can direct you to study groups. There's 3 in the Portland metro area that meet in person, and there's 1 virtual study group that has members all over the Northwest. And you can find details from that. Then probably the most basic place you can get information is from Robert's Rules of Order. So I would advise, honestly, that people not start with a copy of Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. It's 700 pages long. It's a terrible book. It's written really, the language is not clear. It's difficult to understand. And so I discourage people from using that or at least starting there, because it can be difficult to follow, and if you're just starting out, it's going to confuse you more than it's going to help you. Though what I would recommend that you use is this book, which is Robert's Rules of Order in Brief. It uses clear language. It's short. It's less than 200 pages long. It has sample scripts. It's just a lot simpler, and it gives you just a very basic information that honestly is the kind of information that you're going to use 90% of time in meetings. So how to process a motion, how to make a motion, and it just kind of runs through all the basic requirements. Another resource that you can do is make friends with your parliamentarians. We like this stuff and are willing to spend hours upon hours writing out pages of opinions and citing sources and doing the research and going down those fun rabbit holes. I can go for days wandering through Robert's Rules of Order, because one thing kind of leads to another that leads to another.
So if you are in the Pacific Northwest, you're more than welcome to join the Cascadia E-Unit and study the material with us. We can help you study the material, and if you're interested in getting any kind of levels of certification, we can guide you through that process so that you can achieve your goals. I thought I had a much better understanding of the material than what I found out once I really started studying it. But the Robert's Rules of Order really is based on principles of democracy, and if you can follow them, you will end up with organizations that are much more engaged and active and participatory, because people are actually having a role in the decision making. So yeah, come join us.
Yeah, definitely. And also, if you have parliamentary questions or scenarios that you want us to cover on the show, please submit them to us at
ParlamentaryTalk.org.
Sorry, and so that we can talk about them on future editions of the show, because we got all kinds of fun things that we can explore.
Yes, we can take your situation and your conundrum, even if it was something in the past, and tell you how by applying the principles of parliamentary procedure, you could have worked through a process.
Yeah.
Things like, we didn't have a quorum. What do we do? Oh my God.
And a big thank you to Leah for joining us today.
Yes,
and
thank you, Leah.
John and Ash and everybody in the booth there helping us out with all the fun stuff that you see on the screen.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next show.
Thanks.